My father swung a metal tripod at my skull while I was 8 months pregnant. I didn't see it coming. 1 second, I was standing in the middle of a glittering Austin ballroom asking for my car keys. The next, the room tipped sideways, glass shattered somewhere near my ear, and the floor came up fast. I remember the cold of the polished marble before I remember the pain. I remember my hands going to my stomach before I remember reaching for my own face. And I remember looking up from that floor, blood running warm across my forehead, labor contractions already ripping through my body like electrical current, and watching my mother lean toward my brother's fiancée and whisper, "Step back, honey. Don't let it get on your dress." That moment is the one I return to. Not the blow, not the arrest, not the courtroom. That whisper. That is who they were. That is who they had always been. I just finally had proof in 4K security footage. Before I tell you everything that happened next, drop your city and local time in the comments right now. I want to know where in the world you're listening from. It genuinely matters to me, and if this opening already has your heart rate up, hit subscribe. Because what I'm about to tell you gets so much worse before it gets better. And the ending? The ending is worth every single minute of the wait. My name is Deborah. I'm 28. I grew up in Austin, Texas, the second child and only daughter of Pierce and Meredith, in a household where the rules were never written down because they didn't need to be. Everyone already knew them. Preston matters. Deborah manages. My brother Preston is 4 years older than me. Growing up, he was the sun that every planet in our family orbited. When Preston failed algebra, my mother rubbed his shoulders. When I got straight A's, my father changed the subject. When Preston wrecked his first car, my parents borrowed against the house to buy him another one. When I graduated top of my class, they didn't come to the ceremony. Preston had a job interview that day. It was for a pizza place. He didn't get it. I spent 18 years in that house cataloging the gap between what I received and what he did. And then I did the only thing I knew how to do. I left and I built something they couldn't ignore. What I didn't understand yet was that success wouldn't make them proud of me. It would just make me a more attractive target. At 18, my parents made it explicitly clear they would not be contributing a single dollar to my education. College, my mother said, was a luxury for girls who had nothing better to offer. Whatever money existed in the family needed to be preserved for Preston's future ventures, which at that time consisted of him sleeping past noon and watching gaming streams in the basement. So I worked nights. Tech support, Austin call center, 11 p.m. to 4 a.m., fielding screaming customers while my classmates were asleep. Then I went to class. Then I went back to work. For 4 years, I ran on black coffee and the specific, fierce kind of anger that comes from being underestimated by people who are supposed to love you. I graduated from UT Austin with a 4.0 and a degree in computer science. The moment my parents realized I was earning real money, the calls started. Monthly, like clockwork. The water heater, the property tax shortfall, Preston's car insurance, my father's prescription, $1,500, sometimes $2,000, always wrapped in a guilt trip so practiced it almost sounded genuine. After everything we've done for you. That sentence was their currency, and they spent it freely, because for years it worked. I paid. Every time. I told myself this was what family did. I told myself they would eventually see me. I told myself a lot of things that weren't true because the alternative, accepting that they never would, was a grief I wasn't ready to carry. By 25, I was a senior software architect at a major tech firm downtown. 6 figures, benefits, a savings account that didn't make me nauseous to look at. And to mark the occasion of having pulled myself entirely out of the financial wreckage of my childhood with nothing but my own 2 hands, I bought myself a car. Custom metallic blue BMW sedan, $85,000, paid in full in cash. The day I drove it off the lot, I sat in the parking lot for 10 minutes and cried. Not because I was sad, because it was mine. Entirely, completely, undeniably mine. No cosigner, no loan, no one's name on it but mine. It was the most honest thing I had ever owned. I met Ethan 2 years later. He was everything my family wasn't. Steady, clear-eyed. The kind of man who, on our third date, listened to me describe my parents and then set down his fork and said very quietly, "You know that's not normal, right?" I laughed it off. I wasn't ready to hear it yet. We got married, we got pregnant. And as my body changed and my priorities rearranged themselves around the new life I was growing, something else shifted too. A slow, gathering clarity. The kind that comes when you are about to become someone's mother and you start looking at your own childhood with new eyes. I didn't like what I saw, but I still hadn't cut the cord. Not yet. I was still foolishly, faithfully picking up the phone every time they called. Preston announced his engagement 3 months ago. Her name was Chloe. Her family had money, the kind that comes with a last name people recognize, a house in West Austin with a gate, and parents who were going to expect Preston to be something other than what he actually was, which was a 32-year-old man who had never held a job for more than 8 months, and whose most impressive recent accomplishment was finishing a video game on the highest difficulty setting. Preston called me a week before the engagement party. His voice had that particular sweetness it only ever had when he needed something. Thick, practiced, slightly desperate underneath. "Hey, big sis. Just for 3 days. I need to make a good impression on Chloe's family. They're flying in. You know how it is." He wanted the BMW. I said no twice in my head, and yes out loud, because Meredith called right after and cried about what a selfish woman I'd become, and because I was 8 months pregnant and exhausted, and the path of least resistance was shorter than the argument. I handed over the keys with one condition. 3 days. Back at the engagement party. Done. I should have trusted the no. The night of the party, Ethan had an emergency board meeting that ran late. He promised to meet me there as soon as it wrapped. I went alone, which felt wrong in a low-level, physical way I couldn't quite name. My back ached. My feet were swollen. The dress I'd bought for the occasion fit the way clothes fit when your body has been claimed by someone else for 8 months. The event hall was everything Preston needed it to be. Marble floors, high ceilings, an ice sculpture, the specific shimmer of expensive things rented by people who couldn't afford to own them. Chloe's parents looked exactly like I'd imagined. Polished, assessing. The kind of people who Google you before they shake your hand. I made small talk. I ate something I couldn't taste. And by 9 o'clock, the heat of the room and the deep, consistent ache in my lower back were telling me it was time to go home. I found Preston near the ice sculpture. He was holding court with Chloe and her parents, suit jacket just a little too tight, laugh just a little too loud. I kept my voice low and my smile intact. "Hey, congratulations again. I need to head out. I'm exhausted. Can I get my keys?" The laugh stopped. He looked at me, then at Chloe's father, then back at me, and something crossed his face that I had never quite seen before. The mask slipping, just for a second. "What are you talking about?" He said it loudly, performatively, ensuring the entire circle heard. "That car? Mom and Dad gave me that BMW for my engineering graduation years ago. I didn't borrow anything." The room tilted. Chloe raised her hand. Dangling from 2 fingers, smiling like she'd been waiting to do this all night, were my keys, my custom key fob. The one with the small scratch on the back I'd made the first week when I'd caught it on my work lanyard. "Engagement gift," she said sweetly. I don't remember deciding to speak. The words came from somewhere below conscious thought, from the part of me that had been quiet for 28 years and had finally run out of patience. "That is my car. It is registered in my name. I bought it with cash. Give me my keys right now." What happened next took maybe 45 seconds. Pierce and Meredith materialized from the crowd, grabbed my arms, and pulled me toward the edge of the room. My father's grip was hard enough to bruise. His eyes were bloodshot. His voice was the low, pressurized hiss I remembered from childhood, the one that preceded the worst moments. "You are not blowing this up. You are not calling the police. He needs this. You can buy another car." "He stole from me," I said. "You all planned this." Preston appeared beside him, mouth at Pierce's ear, voice just low enough that I was the only other one who could hear. She's going to call the cops and tell Chloe's dad everything. Dad, she's going to destroy it all. I watched my father's face change. I have seen rage in that face before, many times, in many rooms, and I have learned to read the specific point at which it stops being controlled. This was that point. He looked around, wild-eyed, and his gaze landed on something behind me. The videographer's tripod. Heavy black industrial metal, 3 thick legs, standing unattended 2 feet away. He grabbed it. I saw it happen, and I still couldn't move fast enough. The metal connected with the side of my skull with a sound I will never be able to describe to anyone who hasn't heard it from the inside. My glasses shattered. The skin at my hairline split open. The room went white, then dark, then white again, and I was falling. And the corner of the banquet table caught my stomach on the way down, a searing, catastrophic impact, and then the floor. Cold marble, my own blood, my hands already on my stomach, and then the contractions. If you have never experienced premature labor, I cannot give you the words for it. Your body stops asking permission. Every muscle becomes a command. The pain is not sharp, it is total, it is oceanic. It takes up every frequency and leaves room for nothing else. I screamed, and from the floor, through blurred vision, through blood, through the roaring tide of my own body going to war, I saw them. Pierce, handing the tripod back to the videographer, murmuring something about an accident. Preston, slipping my keys into his jacket pocket, smooth, practiced, like he'd rehearsed it. Meredith pulling Chloe backward, one hand at her elbow, whispering about the dress. Not one of them looked at me. I was on the floor bleeding in labor, and not one of them looked at me for more than a second before they looked away. And that is the moment. That is the exact moment the last piece of whatever I had been carrying for 28 years simply dissolved. Not broke, dissolved. Because broken things still have weight. This had none. What replaced it was something colder and more precise than anything I'd ever felt. I looked up at my brother holding my car keys, and I made a promise to the daughter I was about to meet. We get out of this room, and then I level the ground. If this story is doing something to your chest right now, you're not alone. Hit that like button and subscribe. I'm going to tell you exactly what happened next, and I promise you it is more satisfying than anything you're imagining. My cousin Rachel. I need you to remember that name. Rachel was 30 feet away when it happened. She saw everything. While my parents performed normalcy at the edges of the scene and the crowd stood frozen in that particular paralysis of people witnessing something they can't categorize, Rachel moved. She didn't stop to ask if I was okay. She didn't look for the venue manager. She pulled out her phone, dialed my husband, and said 4 words. Ethan, come now, run. He was 6 blocks away. The doors came open 8 minutes later. I have heard people use the word stormed loosely. Ethan stormed into that ballroom the way weather systems storm. He had 4 Austin police officers behind him and paramedics pushing a gurney. He had been in contact with the building's security team since Rachel's call. He had already identified himself as the infrastructure director for the hospitality group's data systems, which meant he had access to the building's server feeds. He dropped to his knees on the marble beside me, and the sound he made is not something I will describe here because it belongs to us. Pierce stepped forward, gathered himself, put on the calm, reasonable, slightly regretful face of a man explaining a minor inconvenience to a mechanic. "Terrible accident," he said to the officers. "She's clumsy in her condition, tripped on a cable. We were just about to call someone." Ethan stood up slowly. He is 6'2". He looked at my father the way you look at something you have already decided about. Then he pointed at the ceiling. At the black dome camera mounted directly above the banquet table, 6 feet from where I had fallen. "I'm pulling the full footage right now," he said. His voice was very quiet. "This entire property runs on systems I manage. So before you finish that sentence, understand that I have watched everything that happened in this room tonight from 4 different angles." Pierce's face went the color of old concrete. Preston was already at the side exit. 2 officers stepped into his path. The paramedics worked around Ethan as he held my hand. My blood pressure was dropping. The baby's heart rate on the portable monitor was unsteady, skipping in the particular pattern that made the lead paramedic look at her colleague and say something fast and quiet. I caught one word: surgery. Ethan leaned down to my face. His hands were shaking, but his eyes weren't. "You're both going to be fine," he said. "I need you to believe that." "The keys," I said. "Don't worry about the car. I want them to be arrested in front of Chloe's parents." He looked at me for 1 second. Then he stood up, spoke 3 sentences to the officer nearest the exit, and turned back to me as they moved toward Preston. "Done," he said. The ambulance doors closed. The sirens started. Through the small back window, I watched the blue and red lights wash over the entrance of the venue. I watched Preston being walked out in handcuffs while Chloe's father stood on the pavement with his arms crossed and his face arranged into the expression of a man calculating how quickly he can distance himself from this family. I watched Pierce being put in a separate car. Then the building turned a corner and disappeared, and I closed my eyes and talked to my daughter the whole way to the hospital. Her name is Iris. She weighed 4 pounds, 14 ounces. She was in the NICU for 11 days, and she was furious about every single one of them, which the nurses said was an excellent sign. From my hospital bed, with Iris monitored 40 feet down the hall and the Travis County DA sitting in a visitor's chair beside my IV stand, I made a series of decisions that I did not make in anger. I want to be clear about that. I made them in the same cold, precise headspace I use when I'm debugging a critical system failure. Methodical, thorough, no wasted motion. Grand theft auto against Preston. The BMW was $85,000, which in Texas qualifies as a second-degree felony. Up to 20 years. Aggravated assault with a deadly weapon against Pierce. Enhanced by the visibly pregnant victim status. Texas law does not look kindly on this. At all. Reckless endangerment and criminal facilitation against Meredith. Then, I picked up my phone and called the landlord of my parents' house. The lease had been in my corporate name for 3 years. I was the one paying it. I pulled the funding and broke the lease effective immediately, while all 3 of them sat in county jail, unable to make bail. I closed the credit cards they'd opened using my information without my knowledge. I terminated the family phone plan. I called every financial institution that had any account cross-referenced with my name and removed them entirely. They had used me as a foundation for 28 years. I removed the foundation. 6 months later, the sentencing hearing. I attended by secure video link. I was sitting in my living room with Iris against my chest when the camera panned to the defense table. I would not have recognized them in a crowd. They were thin. The expensive clothes were gone, replaced by Orange County jumpsuits. Their hair had gone unwashed for the kind of days that show on a person. The private defense attorneys they'd frantically tried to retain had disappeared when they'd run out of access to my money. They had a public defender who was handling 14 other cases and had met with them twice. The prosecution played the security footage, all 4 angles. The room, Pierce choosing the tripod. The swing, my fall. The corner of the table, my hands on my stomach. Then, in the same continuous, unedited clip, Meredith pulling Chloe away from the blood, Preston pocketing the keys, Pierce handing the tripod back and saying she tripped. The courtroom was so quiet I could hear Iris breathing in my arms. Pierce, 15 years, state prison, aggravated assault on a pregnant woman. Preston, 7 years, grand theft and conspiracy. Meredith, 3 years hard probation, permanent felony record, financial blacklist. Chloe's family had dissolved the engagement the night of the arrest, on the pavement, in front of witnesses. Preston lost the car, the woman, the image, and the next 7 years of his life in the span of about 90 minutes. I watched the judge finish speaking. I watched my father's shoulders drop. I watched my mother try to find my face on the video feed, and I looked back at her for exactly 3 seconds, which was 3 seconds more than she deserved, and also the last time I will ever look at her in my life. Then I closed the laptop, the sound of my living room coming back, Iris making the small, grumbling sound she makes when she's about to need feeding, a car passing on the street, Ethan's footsteps in the hallway, was the most beautiful thing I had ever heard. I looked down at my daughter. "We're done," I told her. "All of it. We're done." She opened her eyes, blinked at me with the profound, focused attention of someone who is already paying close attention to everything. The stubborn kind of eyes. Good. She's going to need them. I've spent a lot of time since that night thinking about what I would tell the 22-year-old version of myself, the one paying $1,500 a month to people who publicly dismissed her, who walked 2 miles to class in the rain while funding her brother's couch, who kept telling herself that success would eventually be enough to earn their love. I would tell her this: some people are not waiting to love you. They are waiting to use you. And the cruelest part is that they are often the people whose approval you want most, because you have been taught since before you had language that their love is the love that counts. It isn't. It never was. The love that counts showed up in a ballroom and roared my name. It held my hand in the ambulance. It pulled footage from a server at midnight and made sure every single person in that room was held accountable. The love that counts is in the NICU, 11 days, never once giving up. Blood doesn't make you family. Showing up makes you family. And if you have been showing up for people who won't even look at you when you're bleeding on the floor, I want you to hear this. You are not the problem. You never were. Now I have to ask you something. If it were you, if you were in that ballroom with the floor coming up fast and the people who raised you stepping backward out of the way of the mess, what would you have done? What would you have done from that hospital bed? Tell me in the comments. I mean it. I read every single one. Hit like if this story gave you something. Subscribe if you want to hear more.